Hi, welcome back. So far we've created our resource group, we've put our virtual network in there, we've created a virtual machine and assigned the NIC to our virtual network, we've created a public IP address and a DNS record. So what we're going to do in this module is actually set up some security rules that allow access, and only the access that we want, to our virtual server. So yep, we're LANet, we can find out more about us on our website and also check out the QR code to follow us on LinkedIn. So in this module, we're going to create and assign some network security rules. Okay, so network security groups and rules. The object or the resource that we actually create is called a network security group. It's basically a group of rules. Okay, so what we're going to do is create that group and add some rules to the network security group, and then we're going to assign it to our subnet. A network security group you can assign to a subnet or a NIC, but it's a lot easier and you get better to manage at scale if you assign it to a subnet. NSGs have rules, and NSG rules have a priority, 100 being the highest, and rules are enumerated in order of the lowest number first. Whenever a rule is hit, it doesn't process any further rules there. So what you can do with it is basically a layer 4 firewall rule set. You can control the port, protocol, source and destination, allow and deny, those kind of things. So it's not a layer 7, this one, so you can't read what's inside the messages, you can just look at the layer 4 level. There's also some inbuilt default rules in there, and the default rules to say things like allow access to everything inside the virtual network that it's assigned to. So if you want to explicitly block things within a virtual network itself, you'll need to add rules to be able to do that. Okay, so the task that we're going to do now is create the NSG, assign it to a subnet, add a rule to allow us to remotely access that server only and only us, and then create a HTTP/HTTPS rule to allow access to the web server once we add the web service to it. So what we want to do is make sure these rules are locked down for the source and destination via the IP addresses. Okay, and this is kind of what the NSG rule set will look like. So the NSG web servers is the actual NSG, the network security group resource, and in there you've got inbound and outbound rules. Here is a page view of the inbound rules. So we'll see at the top we've got allow port 22 TCP. Source is one single IP address, which is my public IP address at the time of recording. We just set this destination to any. In this case, we can lock that down to further specific subnets or VNets. In this case, there's only one server in there, so I'm just going to leave it as any. And the action in this case is allow. So it's going to hit that first, and then it's going to go to the next one, which is allow HTTP and HTTPS. Because it's a web server, we're allowing access from the internet to those ports and protocols there. So here we're back in our resource group. We've got our VNet, public IP address and VMs. Now we're going to go and create a new resource called the network security group. So once we find it, we hit create. Again, check the subscription and resource group is correct. Give it a name. We're just going to call it NSG web servers. And then add our tags. And you'll see it'll just come with a bunch of default rules. Okay, now let's go to the resource and go check out what those rules are. You'll see, go to our resource group and you'll see there, we'll do a refresh. And then you'll see the shield. Click on that and you'll see the in and outbound rules. So we're just going to control the inbound rules at the moment. We'll leave the default rules in there, and also you'll notice on the top right we can see associated with. It's not, that NSG is not associated to anything, so it's not actually going to do anything. So we need to associate it to a subnet or a NIC, and we're going to associate it to the subnet here. Okay, once that's done, let's take another look at the NSG. and then the subnet thing will, once we do a refresh, it'll show you properly. So we're going to add the rules in here. So let's take a look at, I can just do my IP address here, but let's just type it in and find out what my IP address is by going to whatsmyip.org, and then we're going to find what our IP address is and take a copy of it, and then set up our first rule, which is allow out from source being my IP address, and the destination at the moment is any, and we're just going to use the pre-built services. We know it's SSH, and it knows it's port 22 TCP. So it's also good practice to put something in the description to help anyone who's managing that environment why that rule is there and what it means. Okay, so that's our port 22 rule allowed into our network, which at this point has only got one server in there. Okay, that's our IP address. So now what we're going to do is set up the same for HTTP and HTTPS, but the source in this case is going to be from anywhere. Because it's going to be a web server, we don't necessarily want to lock it down. Also, it needs to be open for the SSL tests that we do later. So that's our first one, HTTP, which is port 80. And you generally open port HTTP just for the redirect, so the page doesn't just fall over if somebody hits it. So what you want to do is redirect any HTTP request to HTTPS for that secure encrypted connection. Okay, so we've got all our rules in place now. 22 to manage it, 80 for HTTP, and 443 for HTTPS. Just going to do a quick test of that from our server. We're going to use the PowerShell console to run an SSH test and see if we can actually just hit that server, and then we'll go into a bit more detail on running these commands. So first we're going to just connect to it via IP address because the DNS name is probably not properly propagated yet. Let's just zoom in on that, SSH, put our username in there, put an @ to show the IP address what we want to connect to. Okay, so we've got a good connection there, and then we'll look at that in more detail on running commands inside the virtual machine next. Okay, some further readings about network security groups. So what are they, how do they work, and what kind of level of control can you get with these layer 4 rules? What can they be used for, and get a good understanding of what the default rules do, such as the load balancer rule and the virtual network rule, and the final rule, which is the deny rule. Okay, so that's what we've created with the shield. So we've created everything previously, and then we've added the shield. Okay, another thing to understand is you can add third-party or Microsoft Azure firewall to give you a layer 7 firewall. With that you can actually look at the URLs and inspect the traffic that's actually coming through. So have a read up on that. It's a really useful service. So when you get to proper enterprise environments, you need to put in a proper firewall. That needs things like routing traffic to the firewall first for inspection, and then the firewall will say whether it's allowed or denied to maybe internal resources, on-premises resources, and also you can control access to the internet via FQDNs and those kind of things, and also via categories as well. So you could use a firewall to say don't allow access to any gambling sites, for example, and you can use a layer 7 firewall to do those kind of things. So it's worth understanding what the third party and the Azure firewalls can offer over and above the layer 4 free ones. Okay, so in the next session, we're going to actually connect to the server and then run some commands both from the command line and from the Azure portal. So see you in there.